Hi everybody, welcome back to our literature session. Today we are going to talk about the local color. What is the local color? It's a style of writing derived from the presentation of the features and peculiarities of a particular locality and its inhabitant. The term local color, emphasizing on the word local, focuses on featuring the locality of a certain community, its culture, its language, and all the local features of the certain space or the certain setting. It concerned itself mainly with depicting the character of a particular region, concentrating especially upon the peculiarities of dialect, manners, folklore, and landscape that distinguish the area. The use of local color is very distinct in literature, particularly from its origin, which is American literature. And since we are talking about how Philippine literature in English was influenced by the American colonization, there are traces and features of the local color from the American writing style in our own Philippine literature in English. So just like what we just said, it focuses on the region. And the term region or regionalism is very important. It's a key terminology in understanding the use of local color in literature. Moving forward, the term applied to fiction or verse which emphasizes its setting, being concerned with the character of a district or of an era, as marked by its customs, dialect, costumes, landscapes, or other peculiarities that have escaped standardizing cultural influences. In American literature, you would see that the development of the city life, the development of the modern culture has paved way for the regions to also rise up and claim their own identity at par with the identity of America in general. And that is where regionalism in American literature came about in terms of the use of local color. So the term regionalism, and of course local color as well, refer to a literary movement that flourished from the close of the Civil War to the end of the 19th century. Another element common to local color fiction is a degree of narrative distance rendered through the character of a narrator differing in class or place of origin from the region's residents. A variation on this is a narrative voice distance through educated diction or an ironic tone. So just like what we just mentioned, the rising of the modern America, let's say, has paved way to include modern characters, developed cities, settings that are prominent, that are modernized, that are civilized, quote unquote. Hence, regionalism became a part of local color by trying to emphasize the kind of identity they have that is different from the modern one. But the term local color and regionalism referred to the desire of the regions to be equal or at par, PAR, at par with the modern city, the modern setting. Having said that, the use of local color features the region in terms of fighting for its place in literature. Short of saying, American literature is not just about the modern, civilized, city life, urban kind of living, kind of literature, but it also includes the ones in the region. And by highlighting their local culture, their local color, their practices, their customs, what they're trying to do is to include the regions using local color to the narrative of American literature in general. Now, how do we apply that in Philippine literature in English? We know that we have, for example, Metro Manila. And a lot of what's happening in the metro in Manila became the quote-unquote standard when it comes to the modern Filipino life. And as it reflects literature or as it is seen in literary pieces, you know that a lot of our characters are modern in our present day today. Hence, the use of local color highlights the subculture, or if not subculture, highlights the regional culture that is worthy of being highlighted. For example, the use of the descriptions such as the fields, the plantation. These are things that you will see in the provinces, in the region. And stories would highlight all of those settings, even characters that are very provincial, quote unquote, to be able to characterize the local color, to be able to capitalize on what is happening in the region. That's regionalism in literature. And regionalism is usually attached to the writing style of local color. Again, local color emphasizes the local culture that is different from its contrasting culture in the modern one, in the modern setting, such as Manila. Now, for us to be able to see the local color in Philippine literature in English and in other fiction in general, not just in Philippine literature, we have to look at the different characteristics of local color. The first one is setting. The emphasis is frequently on nature and the limitations it imposes. Settings are frequently remote and inaccessible. The setting is integral to the story and may sometimes become a character in itself. Now, imagine the Philippine setting. Imagine that the many provinces in the Philippines. If you talk about a local color in terms of setting, you would see how nature is being described in these provinces, and it has been playing a big role in terms of the development of the literary text, contrary to the city life, because the city life would always project probably the modern ones, probably the prominent ones. In the local color, the deliberate highlighting of the provinces and its nature, its lifestyle would be included as part of the local color. I want to use an example from a short story by Aida Rivera-Ford. The title is Love in Cornhusk. And I want to read a portion of the setting. Let me read it for everybody. Suddenly, from the Gumamela row, a little black mongrel emerged and slithered through the fence with ease. It came to her, head down and body quivering. "Bantay! Ay, bantay!" she exclaimed as the little dog laid its paws upon her skirt to sniff the baby on her arms. The baby was afraid and cried. The big animals barked with displeasure. Try to imagine the kind of setting being described by Aida Rivera-Ford in this story, Love in Cornhusk. You would notice the mentioning of the term bantay, which refers to the name of the dog. Typically in the Philippines, you know that dogs are called bantay in the 90s, in the 80s, or even prior to that. And in the provinces, there are a lot of dogs that are called bantay in the Philippines. There is also the mention of gumamela. You would imagine a kind of quiet provincial barrio life. A kind of barrio where houses have fences with flowers, with gumamela. And of course, I also mentioned, or the story also mentioned, there are big animals that are barking in displeasure, probably the dogs of the kapitbahay or the neighbors. So imagine the kind of barrio life it projects. That is part of the local color. Another characteristic other than the setting is, of course, character. Characters may become character types, sometimes quaint or stereotypical. The characters are marked by their adherence to the old ways, by dialect, and by particular personality traits central to the region. So look at how the characters were being stereotyped. It obviously shows the kind of culture those characters have in that specific setting or in that specific province or location. In the Philippines, you know, for example, that when you talk about the waray, sila yung matatapang. These are women who are strong and aggressive, quote unquote. Of course, there are specific characteristics for people called Ilocanos or Kapampangan, such as magaling magluto kapag Kapampangan. These are stereotypes, maybe good, maybe bad, but somehow in local color, they try to highlight the main culture in the character or the personality of the heroine or the personality of the protagonist or maybe the antagonist as well. When you encounter short stories where they try to use expressions that are very, let's say, Bisaya or very Kapampangan or very Ilocano, these are features in literature intended to show local color. Okay, so it gives you a picture or a flavor of the region. It gives a flavor of the barrio life or the province life that is not typically being highlighted in a modern literature. The character in Aida Rivera-Ford's Love in the Cornhusk is actually named Tinang. Tinang waited a while at the drugstore, which was also the post office of the barrio. Imagine the name Tinang. And that's very provincial. That's very very laid back, let's say. Okay, in the provinces, that people are in the Philippines, particularly the nicknames or the names of these people are very Filipino-like, and you know what I'm talking about here. Have you ever been named in a very Filipino way, like the ones being repeated, like Potpot or Makmak or Junjun or what have you? These names are very provincial, very Filipino, and that shows local color. So it shows the kind of simplicity, the kind of peaceful barrio life where people are contented with the kind of lifestyle they have. Okay, even in terms of their name. These are some of the adherence to old ways as well. When you encounter characters that are mapamahiin in Filipino or who believes in pamahiin or tradition or all of these norms and practices, this is also part of the local color. Okay, so characters. The third one or the third characteristic of local color is seen in the plot. Stories may include lots of storytelling and revolve around the community and its rituals. So the way the plot is developing in a story with local color emphasizes the community life, emphasizes story revolving around the seashore, let's say, or just like this one, Love in the Cornhusk. What is a cornhusk? A cornhusk is it's like a dayame but with the peeling of the corn. I don't know what you call that one, the skin, the peel, yung balat ng mais in Filipino. So when you put that in a pile, like it's a cornhusk, and you usually see that in the provinces. You usually see that in the barrios. So Love in the Cornhusk. So like, look at the setting, and of course the story revolves around this small barrio where Tinang started to recall her love story 2 years ago. And in the story, if you have not read the story yet, in the story, Tinang received a letter. And this letter is from her lover, which is Amado. Amado called her Tinay in the letter. Let me read the letter for all of you. My dearest Tinay, hello, how is life getting along? Are you still in good condition? As for myself, the same as usual. But you're far from my side, and it is not easy to be far from our love. Tinay, do you still love me? I hope your kind and generous heart will never fade. Someday or somehow, I will be there again. Someday and somehow I'll be there again to fulfill our promise. Many weeks and months have elapsed. Still, I remember our bygone days, especially when I was suffering with the heat of the tractor under the heat of the sun. I was always in despair until I imagined your personal appearance coming forward, bearing the sweetest smile that enabled me to view the distant horizon. Tinay, I could not return because I found that my mother was very ill. That is why I was not able to take you as a partner of life. Please respond to my missive at once so that I know whether you still love me or not. I hope you did not love anybody except myself. I think I am going beyond the limit of your leisure hour, so I close with best wishes to you, my friends Gonding, Serafin, Bonjo, etc. Yours forever, Amado. P.S. My mother died last month. That is the letter included in the short story. And that letter was received by Tinay or Tinang in the story, and she started reading it under the calamansi tree. Okay, look at the mention of calamansi tree. That's very local. Okay, that's very barrio type. She sat under the calamansi tree in the corn husk and started reading the letter and recalled the love affair, okay, or the the relationship that they had 2 years ago. And I will not reveal the entire story because I want you to read. It's very short, but it's an interesting example for the local color. Other than setting, character, and plot, Another characteristic of local color is seen in the theme of the story. Many local color stories share an antipathy to change and a certain degree of nostalgia for an always past golden age. A celebration of community and acceptance in the face of adversity characterizes women's local color fiction. Thematic tension or conflict between urban ways and old-fashioned rural values is often symbolized by the intrusion of an outsider or interloper who seeks something from the community. If you encounter stories with conflict between the modern life and the provincial life, or characters who's very rich and the other one is very poor and very simplistic, these are some of the characteristics of the theme under the writing local color or under the local color literature. There is the element of nostalgia or recalling the past, recalling the experiences of the character. Probably somebody who came from the province, who went to Manila or went abroad and started to recall or miss the simple life. That's part of the local color. So they're trying to emphasize how beautiful a simple life is in the province or in the barrio. So in The Love in Cornhusk by Aida Rivera-Ford, this short story obviously talks about how Tinay or Tinang recalled the kind of love story they had. That nostalgia is part of the theme, and that is a feature of local color. Lastly, narrator. The narrator is typically an educated observer from the world beyond who learns something from the characters while preserving a sometimes sympathetic, sometimes ironic distance from them. The narrator serves as mediator between the rural folk of the tale and the urban audience to whom the tale is directed. Most fiction in the local color would emphasize a narrator that is very distant from the character. Maybe a third-person narrator who talks about the conflicts of the characters in the province. Just like in Aida Rivera-Ford's Love in a Cornhusk, there is a narrator in the story, and that narrator is somebody who's typically educated or well-versed or well informed about what's happening in the life of Tinay, okay, in the life of the character. And narrator, just like what we've read, serves as mediator between the rural folk of the tale and the urban audience. So if you read this story, it's the narrator communicating or mediating between the rural folk in the characters and the urban audience, which is us, tayo. We are the ones in a modern setup. But we're trying to see a perspective of the barrio, a perspective of the province or the region through the narrator, through the storytelling of the narrator. So the narrator becomes the mediator. So these are the characteristics of the use of local color in literature. So as you read a lot of Philippine literature in English, fiction, sometimes even poetry, you would see a lot of these characteristics. That is local color in literature. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you learned something. Happy reading.